Hello, I'm Jesse Martin. Renowned as a painter of princes and the prince of painters, Peter Paul Rubens lived during the 1600s when Europe was torn by war. Rubens' fame allowed him to travel freely through Europe's royal courts. It was the perfect cover for his other life, as a secret agent for the royalty of Spain. He managed the impossible when he brokered a peace agreement between England and Spain. Just like their creator, the two stolen Rubens paintings in this episode of Art, Crimes, and Mysteries also traveled the world, caught in a web of intrigue.
It was the most audacious of art thefts.
It was a shock.
Two priceless paintings by 17th century artist Peter Paul Rubens disappeared from a museum in Spain.
They were really masterpieces and beautiful things.
They were feared lost forever, until one appeared in Sweden in the hands of a mysterious Spaniard.
Even if I try to get him angry, it doesn't work.
It was a cat-and-mouse chase, with the criminal always one step ahead of the law.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't think they could possibly free him.
It would take years before new clues appeared on another continent.
It was something like right out of Miami Vice.
An undercover customs agent was at the center of a dramatic sting, with an art expert as the frontman.
He said to me, "Charlie, since you're going to die anyway, you don't mind if we use you as a shield, do you?"
An international cast of characters included one who proved to be a loose cannon.
At one point, I decided I would have a little fun.
In the next hour, the amazing story of the two priceless masterpieces that traveled the world, tracked down by art experts and cops who risked their lives to save them. September 16th, 1985, La Coruña, a quiet town on the Atlantic coast of northern Spain. It was an ordinary day at the Museum of Fine Arts, which, although small, housed a number of priceless works of art. Typical of cash-starved provincial museums in Spain in the 1980s, there was virtually no security. Just two staff were employed to keep an eye on the day's few visitors. A man in a dark coat appeared to be just another art lover. No one else was in the gallery, and there was no surveillance system. In the evening, after the last visitor had left, a priceless pair of Rubens paintings had vanished. There were no fingerprints and no other clues. For the police, it was a dead end.
It's a type of robbery which is very difficult to solve. The whole thing, when we heard about it, was very, very black. There were paintings that we thought we will never appear again.
The theft was reported to the Art Loss Register, an international organization that records and helps track down stolen art. But there were no leads on these two valuable works by the master of Baroque painting, Peter Paul Rubens. Known as one of the greatest artists of 17th century Europe, Rubens was wildly successful in his day.
The comparison in our own past century perhaps would be Picasso. I mean, he was internationally known. He was called the painter of princes and the prince of painters.
Rubens painted for the royalty of Europe and pioneered the Baroque style, which was sensuous, emotional, and full of energy. He became famous for painting full-figured, voluptuous women, the Rubenesque body. Like many busy artists of the era, Rubens hired other painters to assist on large canvases. It is impossible to know for sure which parts of these were painted by Rubens, but the smaller works were known to have been sketched by Rubens himself.
These oil sketches are terribly valuable because they represent Rubens' own handiwork. He had no assistants painting the oil sketches. They're pure Rubens.
The two stolen paintings had an estimated value of $3 million. They both depicted characters from Greek mythology.
Daedalus and the Minotaur was a scene out of ancient mythology where Daedalus was this architect who designed an elaborate maze for the king of Crete, at the end of which was this ferocious beast, the Minotaur.
The painting of Daedalus and the Minotaur is very different in mood to its companion piece, Aurora.
And the other was a rather more lovely figure of Aurora, the goddess of dawn, and she holds in her hand a vial of dew, which of course dawn sprinkles traditionally in art each morning as the sun rises.
His technique is like a rocket, like a rocket that goes into space and you don't know what is he going to fall. I mean, he's free and unexpected.
The style of these pictures has a tremendously refreshing immediacy to it. You can actually see, as you look at them, the various glazes, the layers of paint in which Rubens built up the image against the wooden board on which he painted. You have this sense of luminosity, of light playing on the different shades of color, and the picture can really be said to glow.
The theft put the two paintings in great danger. Because of Rubens' fame, it's almost impossible for criminals to sell his rare and valuable work.
If they cannot sell them, they probably destroy them or something like that. It's very, very difficult to get paintings that were stolen back.
There was no word from the black market of anyone trying to sell them. Had these irreplaceable paintings been destroyed? The Spanish police had no leads. The trail went cold. But then, 4 months after the theft, and half a continent away, the Swedish National Museum in Stockholm received a call.
An artist, Harald Lyth, called me and said that he had a painting he thought was by Rubens, and he wanted to show me this painting.
Harald Lyth claimed he was helping a friend who wanted it authenticated and valued. Ural did not expect much. Paintings brought to the museum for valuation were usually copies, not originals.
I asked him if I could keep the painting and look at it more thoroughly.
But Ural was busy and put the picture aside, until she got another call from Harald Lyth.
Harald phoned me and said he was going to come and get the painting because the owner wanted to sell it. And he was in a hurry, so I just rushed to the library.
In a book of Rubens' work, she came across a photograph of Daedalus and the Minotaur.
I actually found this subject, the same theme, Daedalus and Minotaur. So of course I compared the photo in the book with the painting, and usually when it is a copy, you can always detect something that differs, There is a highlight placed strongly or a line. Every line was the same. Every shadow, every highlight. So I thought this must be the painting.
Ural was astonished. She was convinced she had a genuine Rubens. The book told her the painting should be in Spain. She thought it might be stolen and rang the Prado, the Spanish National Museum in Madrid, to find out.
She was very excited because it's a big thing to recover a painting. It's a very unusual thing to recover a stolen painting.
The Prado confirmed that the painting was one of the pair stolen from the museum in La Coruña.
I phoned the police and also our legal person in the museum to see if by any means I could keep the painting and not give it back to Harald Lyth.
Surprisingly, the lawyer advised Ural that the museum didn't have the authority to keep the painting. But before the police could get involved, Harald Lyth insisted on getting the painting back.
I was very upset. I think I had tried talk to everybody. What could I do?
Ural handed the picture over with great reluctance. But the Swedish police pursued the case. They contacted their Spanish colleagues via Interpol, the international police agency. Interpol empowered a local detective in Harold Lutz district of Stockholm to investigate.
I got a telegram from Interpol that told that this Mr. Luth had been at the Natural Museum and show a painting whose probably stolen in Spain.
Klaus Trotzig was used to working on local cases from shoplifting to murder. He had never encountered international art crime before. He started his investigation by calling in prime suspect Harold Lutz.
Harold Lutz told me when I spoke to him in that particular day in the morning that he was helping a friend.
Harold told Klaus he no longer had the painting. He had returned it to his friend, a Spaniard living in Stockholm. This man, Ramon Ramudo, was also asked in for questioning. He was cooperative, but didn't give much away.
Even if I try to get him angry, it doesn't work.
Cool under pressure, Ramon Ramudo finally admitted to owning the painting, but he claimed it was not a genuine Rubens.
He told me that he bought this painting to know that it might not be the real Rubens, but the painting was a copy.
If the painting was just a copy, there would be no case. Klaus needed to examine it to find out. Then Ramon Ramudo dropped a bombshell. He no longer had the painting. He had taken it to Gallery Morgan, art dealers in Stockholm's Old Town.
He told Gallery Morgan to get an expert opinion about this painting and then sell it abroad.
Was it too late to save Daedalus and the Minotaur? Had it already been sold abroad? And did the mysterious Spaniard have anything to do with the other stolen painting, the Aurora? Two priceless Rubens were stolen from a Spanish museum in 1985. One of the paintings, Daedalus and the Minotaur, surfaced 4 months later in Stockholm, Sweden. Before the police could impound it, the suspect, Ramon Ramudo, had taken it to the art dealer's Gallery Morgan for valuation and sale abroad. Detective Klaus Trotzig discovered that the painting had been sent to Sotheby's auction house in New York for authentication and sale.
I have contact with Gallery Morgan, and they're going to arrange with Sotheby's that the painting come back to Sweden.
Klaus had rescued the painting. For the time being, it was in safe hands at the National Museum in Stockholm. But Ramon Ramudo still maintained that the painting was not a genuine Rubens, so legally it belonged to him. State prosecutor Hans Kolb was brought in to get the truth out of Ramon.
He tried to explain to me that it was very important that he would not lose his picture because he had paid quite a lot of money.
Hans was suspicious, as Ramon Ramudo was not a professional art dealer. In fact, he was anything but. He worked 2 low-paying jobs, as a chauffeur and for a close friend. The friend was Nelson de la Rosa, who had an office cleaning company, Coyote.
When Nelson was abroad, Ramon took care of this firm, and a lot of students from Leningrad work at this firm.
Ramon claimed he bought the painting from 2 art students working at the cleaning company. Klaus and Hans wanted to question them.
Those students, we couldn't find them.
Ramon Ramudo's story was falling apart, so Klaus decided to pay him a surprise dawn visit. He was searching for clues into how Ramon acquired Daedalus and the Minotaur, and hoping to find the other stolen painting, the Aurora. There was a lot of art in the apartment, but nothing of any value. There was even work by Ramon. He claimed to have exhibited in several Stockholm galleries. There was definitely nothing by Peter Paul Rubens. Klaus examined Ramon's passport, but the entry and exit stamps did not tell him the story he'd hoped for.
We found that he'd been in Spain from 21st to 27th of September, the week after the theft in La Coruna.
Ramon seemed to have an alibi for the crucial time, the date of the theft. Ramon Ramudo could not be charged with the theft of Daedalus and the Minotaur, but he could be charged with possession of it as stolen property. He was prosecuted and sentenced to 2 years in jail.
The criminal was convicted, and the painting was meant to go back to Spain, so I was pleased, of course.
But Ramon was not willing to give up that easily. His lawyer filed an appeal, claiming the painting could not have been the one stolen from the Spanish museum because it was the wrong size.
They measured the painting, and they looked in the catalogue of the museum, and there was a difference of half a centimeter, and that was silly.
Nevertheless, Ramon's lawyer insisted that the painting was a fake and won the appeal.
I was quite astonished. I was sort of almost furious. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't think they could possibly free him because of that reason.
I was very disappointed and upset about this, because I feared, of course, that we had to give the painting back.
Legally, the painting was now Ramon's, but Hans wasn't about to give up either.
I had the possibility to very quickly go to the third court and appeal.
Hans had to convince the final appellate court that the painting was genuine and therefore stolen. Ural had a clever idea.
I decided to make a transparency of the painting we had in custody.
She then made a negative from the Spanish Museum's photograph of the original painting.
And I brought these two photos to the court so I could show them how the negative photo could glide over the positive, and that every line, every shadow, every black part was covering the white parts, so everybody could see with their own eyes that it really was the same painting.
It was a triumph. The Supreme Court upheld the original sentence of a 2-year jail term for Ramon.
I felt very, very good. So at last the justice had been done.
The painting was sent back to La Coruña. I was excited and happy that it was over and that we won.
But it was a hollow victory. The Swedes, who pride themselves on their tolerance, give non-violent criminals 6 months to put their affairs in order before they start a prison sentence. Ramon made the most of their generosity. He fled the country.
Several times I thought of the Aurora picture. We talked about it, the police and me, where could it be, and, well, we had no idea.
With Ramon Ramudo on the run, the Aurora could be anywhere, or even destroyed. Where would Ramon surface next? And would he have the Aurora?
Welcome back to Art Crimes and Mysteries. International law is one of the problems in prosecuting art theft. Extradition treaties don't always cover these sorts of crimes. For thieves, it's like an open invitation to steal from one country and move to another. The robbers who stole in this case took full advantage.
One of the 2 Rubens paintings stolen from a museum in Spain in 1985 had been recovered in Sweden. But the convicted man, Ramon Ramudo, had escaped justice and was in hiding. 6 years passed without a clue. Then, in 1991, halfway around the world from Sweden, there was an astonishing development in Miami. U.S. Customs Police received some unexpected information about the other missing painting, the Aurora.
On April 25th of 1991, I received information from a confidential informant that an individual in Miami was offering a stolen Rubens painting for sale on the black market.
Dave D'Amato was new to the fraud squad, having just transferred over from narcotics 3 months earlier. There were very few art crime cases in Miami, so Dave sought advice by contacting the Art Loss Register in New York, where the Rubens paintings had been reported stolen 6 years earlier. Yet there appeared to be no record of the Aurora.
We took the name Aurora and thought, it might be something else. It's not necessarily the exact title.
At the time, the Art Loss Register was not computerized, so Anna's search meant going through hundreds of back issues of its magazine.
In 1986, we found what we believed was a possible match, which was a painting by Peter Paul Rubens that had been stolen in Spain from a museum in La Coruna with the title Dawn, which in Greek mythology is really a synonym for Aurora.
On the strength of Anna's information, Dave D'Amato decided to launch an operation to recover the picture. He recruited agent Zach Mann to his team. Zach had also previously worked in narcotics, piloting an anti-smuggling boat, but he did have a little experience of art crime.
I had some knowledge of the art world and the crimes committed within that art culture, having worked on pre-Columbian art cases.
Dave D'Amato discussed the Aurora case with Zach and other agents. They decided their best hope of recovering the painting was for one of them to go undercover and pose as an art buyer.
Well, I asked an agent in our office if he would act as a interested buyer using the name Hank Thomas.
Hank was kind of a older-looking gentleman, somewhat portly, someone you just wouldn't picture as an undercover police officer, and I think he took some pride in that because he had worked numerous other undercover cases.
With their undercover buyer in place, the agents were ready to begin. First, they got their informer, going by the name of Stanley, to call the seller of the painting, a woman named Miss Orly Bagel.
I did some initial checks on Orly Bagel. We didn't have a date of birth, but we had the name. And I was able to determine that an Orly Bagel had traveled into the United States several weeks prior from Mexico.
Dave found out that Orly Bagel had dual Israeli-Mexican citizenship. She ran an import-export business in Miami, but lived mostly in Mexico, where she promoted musicians and entertainers. She had no criminal record. Orly suggested meeting Stanley and his art buyer, Hank Thomas, at the Ocean Grand Hotel, Miami Beach.
When Hank Thomas, the agent, and the informant showed up at the meeting, Orly Bagel was present in the lobby of the hotel.
Orly suggested going to a room upstairs, but for safety, Stanley insisted they stay in the lobby.
The undercover agent had a body wire on, and we were monitoring that from outside.
We wanted to prove conclusively that the picture was stolen. We also wanted to prove conclusively that the defendants knew that it was stolen at the time they were attempting to sell it. We needed to prove all of those things beyond a reasonable doubt. So we wanted to get it on tape if we could.
A short time later, two Latin males showed up and produced the painting from a briefcase. The agent simply viewed the painting. He didn't do a lot of talking. He was just looking at it, and they discussed a little bit about the price, which was $3.5 million is what they were asking.
Hank returned to Customs headquarters and delivered his own spin on what the painting looked like.
You know, he was kind of a no-nonsense guy and just kind of spit it out and said the fat lady sitting on a cloud with a light in her hand.
He described the colors. He said it was painted on a thin panel of wood. Described the approximate size, and then we did our research from there.
What Dave needed now was an expert to advise on how to spot a genuine Rubens. He asked Zach to do some research.
I went to the University of Miami's library, identified myself as a customs agent who needed information on Peter Paul Rubens.
Zach searched the shelves and found the 2-volume work on Rubens sketches by the world's leading authority, Professor Julius Held. There was even a photograph of the painting, which Hank had described.
I was able to contact Professor Held through the publisher. Professor Held told me over the phone several characteristics to look for. He was obviously very familiar with it. And I actually put the agent on the phone with Professor Held, and they went over details of the painting.
Establishing the authenticity of the painting was crucial.
If they were trying to sell a bogus painting, we could have gone through all of this and spent hundreds of man-hours, thousands of dollars, all for naught.
It was time for Hank to get back in touch with Orly Bagel.
The undercover agent advised Orly that he had an expert who he was going to bring down to look at the painting, but that the expert had given him some identifiers to look for before he was willing to get on an airplane and fly down to Miami to view the painting.
Hank planned a second meeting to look for the identifiers, details which would help to authenticate the painting. But suddenly, Orly started to get cold feet.
The owner of the painting thought it was going a little bit too smoothly, that she should be careful. So she was getting a little nervous at that point, and she questioned Hank, the undercover agent, as to his identity.
Stanley, the informer, tried to smooth things out. He argued that as Hank was old, overweight, and unfit, he couldn't possibly be a cop. He managed to allay Orly's fears, and the second meeting was on.
The undercover agent had a body wire that we were monitoring from outside. He also had a made-up briefcase with a hidden camera inside.
Dave's team was building up evidence against the gang.
When you record incriminating statements, both on tape and video, that is a big plus for any investigation. That goes a long way to convincing a jury of their culpability. One of the identifiers that Professor Held told me to look for was the number 284, which was supposedly marked in the lower right-hand corner of the painting. It was a catalog reference number put on by the museum.
But it wasn't there. Hank asked the young Latino man whether there had ever been a number on the picture and what that number was.
At that point in time, the younger Latin male said he could make a telephone call to the owner and ask him why it wasn't present. He came back in and told the agent that he had just spoken with the owner, and the owner advised that he had removed that number because he didn't want it traced to him. That particular piece of information was a big breakthrough for us. In fact, the owner had stated that he thought the number 285 was painted on that painting, and as we had learned by that time, 2 paintings had been stolen at the same time. The other Rubens painting stolen at that time had the number 285. The fact that the supposed owner had come back and said he thought it was 285 told us that he had direct knowledge of both paintings.
The suspects were getting nervous. They wanted to go ahead with the sale as quickly as possible, but the police still needed a Rubens expert to 100% authenticate the picture. It was Friday, and Dave couldn't get an expert to Miami till after the weekend. Would Orly wait for Monday, or would her nerves get the better of her? The Miami Customs Police were planning a takedown operation to seize the Aurora, one of 2 Rubens paintings stolen from a Spanish museum 6 years earlier. U.S. Customs agent Dave D'Amato urgently needed an expert to come to Miami to authenticate it. But Professor Held, who had been helping with the investigation, was too old and frail to travel. He suggested his former student, New York book publisher and Rubens biographer, Charles Scribner.
I was very surprised when I got the call, when I said, well, all right, I'd be happy to do it, but I can't do it on the weekend. And he was quite insistent that the criminals involved were getting a little bit nervous, were on edge, and he wasn't sure that he could hold them over. And I said, well, could you hold them till Monday morning? I will take the earliest flight down, the 6 o'clock flight. That was agreed upon. I went home and announced to my wife and older son, Charlie, that this was the most exciting chance I'd been given to do an armed undercover operation in Miami Beach 2 weeks before my 40th birthday, and that this was just a lifetime's dream. And I thought that my son at least would be excited and share my enthusiasm. He was horrified. He went crying to his mother that I was an idiot. My wife was furious at me, but I told her I had given my word that I would do it, and I had to do it. And secretly, I really looked forward to it.
When Charles Scribner arrived at Customs headquarters, the operational briefing was already in progress.
We brought him into our office. We had several agents, about 10 or 12 agents present. I explained to the agents who were going to be involved in the arrest that Charles Scribner was an expert, and that he would be going in this third meeting with us to look at the painting. He'd obviously never taken part in anything like this before, working with a group of armed federal agents and making arrests and so forth. So he was quite nervous.
It was like going to a first-class seminar at a university, and the only moment during this that I was given some pause was when they talked about bulletproof vests, and I naively asked if I would be given one too, and I was told, oh no, we can't give you one, it would look too bulky and it would give you away.
Undercover operations are fraught with danger.
The agents had my full attention at that point, especially when one mentioned that during some past similar buy-bust operation that something had gone awry and there'd been some shooting taking place in one of the lobbies of a Miami Beach hotel.
It was crucial that Charles didn't jeopardize the takedown by saying too much.
My briefing was very specific. I was not to say anything. I was simply to go in as the art advisor and simply look at the picture and then simply indicate whether I thought this was the original Rubens or not.
We had the undercover agent prepared to go in with the informant and with Charles Scribner. We had an undercover taxi parked out front. Agent Mann and another agent were monitoring the conversation from that taxi. We had agents positioned around the hotel, in front, on the sides, and in back, which was on the beach side of the hotel. So we had it covered by about 10 or 12 agents.
When we got out of the car, I think Hank was perhaps worried that I might appear very nervous and apprehensive. And to loosen me up, he said, you know, Charlie, since you're going to die anyway, you won't mind if we use you as a shield, will you? And I'd started laughing, and I said, you know, Hank, I'm not sure I want to be 40 anyway.
On entering the hotel, Stanley, the informer, held back, while Hank and Charles greeted Orly and her associates. Hank was again carrying a concealed camera in his briefcase. Outside the hotel, a dozen hidden agents had the meeting under close surveillance.
There was nobody else in sight. No U.S. special agents seen anywhere around the building or even as passers-by. There was simply one solitary sunbather out by this pool at the rear of the lobby.
But there was a new danger. Orly was now with 3 men, the 2 Latinos as expected, and another unknown man.
This fourth person was a surprise to us. Orly had made mention that she would have someone accompany the undercover agent to the bank to retrieve the money, and the word she used was for security. So we were concerned that possibly there might be firearms involved. Anytime security is mentioned, it usually goes hand in hand with firearm.
At last, Charles was handed the picture.
I was given a manila envelope, and I opened it, and sure enough, there was the Rubens oil sketch inside, wrapped in this kind of greasy red cloth. It was the most unexpected way to discover a Rubens. The casualness with which this picture had been packed appalled me. I couldn't believe I was holding at least $500,000 worth of art in my hands and it had been so poorly wrapped. And I've completely at that point forgot my direction that I was to say nothing. And I turned to Orly Bagel and said, you know, this is no way to wrap a Rubens. The next time you have a picture like this, you must take much better care of it.
Agent Maxey and I were sitting there kind of thinking, I don't think this was part of the plan.
Charles wasn't sticking to the script. The more he said, the greater the risk that he would slip up and give himself and the undercover agent away. If the suspects were armed, this could be lethal.
I had this picture to myself, or at least to myself and to the criminals and the U.S. Customs special agents. And I decided to give a little seminar on Rubens, and we discussed the identification of the figure. Was she Aurora, or was she, as some scholars had speculated, the personification of the soul, Psyche, in which case what she was holding would not be a little vial of dew, but rather a lamp, the light of the soul. And I could see their eyes were beginning to glaze over a little bit like the painting itself. And I thought Hank was going to pass out at one point because this was the last thing he expected.
We got a little concerned because when you go in with a plan and things start to change and you don't know what's going to happen after that, and you're outside listening in, it can be a little nerve-wracking.
The agents had recruited a loose cannon. Was Charles going to blow their carefully planned operation? Were the men with Orly carrying weapons? Would Charles and the Aurora get caught in the crossfire? Miami, 1991. U.S. Customs Police were at a crucial point in their undercover sting. They were moments away from recovering a stolen Rubens painting, the Aurora. But the agents were anxious that the art expert brought in to authenticate the picture, Charles Scribner, was about to blow their cover. Although he had been instructed to say nothing, he wouldn't stop talking.
I felt it was important to do what any Rubens scholar coming down from New York naturally would do when holding such a picture, and that is be enthusiastic and enjoy the moment. At one point, though, I decided I would have a little fun. And I turned to Orly Bagel and I said, you know, this is the most beautiful Rubens oil sketch I have ever seen outside of a museum. Where did you get it? Well, I thought Agent Thomas would faint at that point. She had the most magnificent answer. It was classic. One word. She said, inheritance. And I chuckled to myself, and I thought, that is a great classic answer.
The undercover agent took Mr. Scribner to the side and asked him how sure he was that we had a real Rubens in front of us.
He asked me several times, well, are you absolutely sure? And I said, yes. And he said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how sure are you? And I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's an 11. And then he asked a third time. And I finally said, you know, I have 2 sons, and I sometimes wonder where they came from. But I have no doubt where this picture came from.
At last, the police had confirmation that the painting was genuine. The next hurdle was to get Charles out of harm's way. Stanley, the informer, came to escort him out of the hotel.
And then one of the 3 men, the burliest of the 3, made it clear that he was going with me outside the hotel. And that was the first time I ever had any real fear or unease. My immediate reaction was that he suspected something was foul and I was going to be his hostage. But by the time we reached the entrance door to the hotel, this man miraculously vanished. And as soon as I saw the taxi and saw Zach in the driver's seat, I felt I was home free. I had made it.
With Charles safely out of the building, the agents could move in.
Police! Get on the ground! Get on the ground now! Get down! Get down now!
But where was the 4th suspect? The man who had followed Charles and Stanley out of the lobby.
The undercover agent advised us that this 4th individual had disappeared. He gave a description to us, and we started searching the area for him.
I noticed that the bathroom door was open, and I could see someone's elbow move just ever so slightly. Searched his bag, and we found a semi-automatic handgun.
Charles only found out later why this man had followed him and then hidden in the bathroom.
What had happened was he and Stan had known each other. As soon as Stan came in to pick me up, they made eye contact. Stan was apparently very surprised to see him there and must have registered his concern and surprise in his eyes, at which point this man took the message and thought, I've got to get out of here. Something bad's about to happen. So that it wasn't that I was to be his hostage. It turned out that he thought of me as his escape route.
The suspects were taken to customs headquarters for processing. For the first time, the agents discovered who the three men really were. Pablo Alvarez and his father Roberto and Michael Dimitrov. Orly Bagel, the front woman, came clean about her involvement. She explained how she was pulled into the scam by Roberto Alvarez. He had his own import-export business in Nicaragua, but she didn't know who was behind the plan to sell the painting. Roberto refused to talk. His son, Pablo, was more cooperative.
The younger Latin male, the son, had brought the painting into Miami from Managua, Nicaragua, a few weeks earlier. He told us that he had concealed it in the same briefcase that we saw at the meetings.
Pablo claimed the painting had been given to his father by a business associate who he knew only as Ramon.
Mr. Alvarez did not know his last name, but said it started with the letter R and sounded similar to his first name.
Dave persuaded Pablo to make a recorded phone call to Nicaragua.
We asked Pablo to ask the owner what the bottom line figure he would accept for the painting would be, and he advised $1 million.
This was the confirmation the agents had hoped for, that Ramon was the man controlling the deal. Pablo also managed to squeeze Ramon's last name out of him, Ramudo. The same Ramon Ramudo who had been convicted in Sweden for the possession of the other stolen Rubens, Daedalus and the Minotaur. The prosecution had enough evidence to take Ramon's accomplices to court for trying to sell the Aurora.
Ultimately, the defendants were charged with attempting to sell stolen property that had crossed international boundaries. We were able to prove that the painting was stolen in Europe out of the museum in Spain, and that it came into the United States, and that the defendants, knowing that it was stolen, attempted to sell it.
Roberto and Pablo Alvarez and Michael Dimitrov were each given 18-month jail terms. Orly Bagel avoided prison because she cooperated with the prosecution. She was given probation. But Dave and Orlando also wanted to bring to trial the man behind the crime. They hoped to get Ramon Ramudo extradited from Nicaragua. But again, the law was working in Ramon's favor.
The treaty between the United States and Nicaragua did not call for the extradition of an individual who was charged with this type of offense. If it were in murder or something else, yes, but not for stolen property. So that's where our case began, and that's where it ended.
Ramon Ramudo was still on the run, but the operation was a triumph. The Spanish were delighted to get their painting back. The Aurora was at last reunited with Daedalus and the Minotaur in La Coruña.
I was very happy when the Aurora appeared. The robbery of the two paintings attracted the attention of the authorities and helped to develop a new museum and to have the collection properly shown with all the securities that were needed.
But the question remained, who stole the paintings from Spain? The date stamps in Ramon's passport indicated that he was not in Spain at the time of the theft.
Because of the dates in the passport, it made me more and more convinced that he wasn't alone, and not necessarily the one who was responsible for the theft.
But even if someone else stole the paintings, was it Ramon's idea? In his police interview, Ramon Ramudo claimed that he'd never heard of the Museum of Fine Arts in La Coruña. But as a child, he had walked past the museum every day on his way to school. Stone grew up to become an art lover.
Just as the King of Spain honored Peter Paul Rubens for his services with a knighthood, U.S. Customs agent Dave D'Amato received a similar honor from the current King of Spain, Juan Carlos. He was awarded the prestigious Order of Merit. It's nice to see that chivalry isn't dead. For Art, Crimes, and Mysteries, I'm Jesse Martin. Thanks for watching.